guys, it's Naseem here. Now, ever since Apple has introduced the iPhone 14 lineup, many of us have been concerned as to whether or not we should get the iPhone 14 Pro Max or the iPhone 14 Pro. And in this video, I wanted to break down what each phone is good at in terms of various stages of use so that you guys can get an idea of which phone is actually better in terms of value. Now, the iPhone 14 Pro and the iPhone 14 Pro Max are two phones that really have a lot in common. Both have a similar hardware to their counterparts, both support the latest versions of iOS 16, both have really good looking displays that offer a premium visual experience, and both have pretty high prices when compared to other phones. But looking at them from an individual standpoint, there are some things that each phone was better at. The iPhone 14 Pro Max has a much bigger looking display and a better battery due to its size. And the iPhone 14 Pro is basically the same phone, but many people enjoy the fact that you can get something that's as powerful as the 14 Pro Max and can still have a more comfortable to use size. So even though both of these phones had many things that were really good, they both had their downsides when it came to many different things. And today we will be taking a look into what each has to offer so that it can help your decision on which one is actually worth it. So I will be comparing the iPhone 14 Pro and the iPhone 14 Pro Max based on 5 different categories, starting with display, software, battery, speakers, and last but not least, cameras. Now the first thing that I want to look at is the display. Now the iPhone 14 Pro has a 6.1 inch display and the iPhone 14 Pro Max has a 6.7 inch Super Retina XDR display that are very comparable to each other as far as the visual experience. They both have ProMotion 120Hz refresh rate, which basically means that whenever you're doing things like scrolling or moving through the software, it'll move smoother, which really improves the quality. When it comes to responsiveness, the iPhone 14 Pro Max and 14 Pro were pretty much the same. Both phones were able to quickly respond whenever I scrolled or pressed on something and felt very premium. Now when it comes to the size of both displays, the Pro Max does have a bigger screen, but size is completely based on preference. Some people love the biggest screen and some people love having a normal size screen. But one thing that I will say is that no matter which one you go for, you should know that Apple has trimmed down the bezels and both screens are actually bigger than last year's iPhones. And speaking of notches, both the iPhone 14 Pro Max and the 14 Pro have completely changed the game with its latest release of the Dynamic Island pill-shaped notch. And I pretty much had the same opinion when it came to brightness. Both the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max had really bright screens that were very easy to see whenever the sun was shining, and both phones' auto brightness worked really well. Now the final thing that I really liked about the 14 Pro Max and the 14 Pro's display was the fact that they both had really great resolutions. Both phones had nice and vibrant colors, both phones had sharp displays, and both phones gave me an overall great experience. So I will say that in terms of resolution when watching videos, it was pretty much tied. And to give you guys an idea of my experience with each phone, here are some examples of me playing games and watching videos.
Russell will be reevaluated again tomorrow with the ankle sprain. Bryant straight away three. Perfect.
So now that we've taken a look at the display, the next thing I want to look at is software. Now when it came to software, I would say that both the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max performed really well. They both did whatever I needed them to do very efficiently, and again, they gave me pretty much the same experience all across the board. Both phones were able to handle the software smoother, the animations were much better. I still would get minor lags here and there, but it was much less often than the previous models, and even with those minor lags, it would happen whenever the phone got hot. And when it comes to software running heavier apps though, both phones held up really well. The 14 Pro and Pro Max ran really smooth whenever the extra ventilation kicked in. iOS 16 was even better on these phones because of the fact that they had the 120Hz refresh rate. But overall, both phones did a really good job at creating an immersive experience. Now the next thing that I want to look at is the battery life. Now the battery on the 14 Pro Max was much better for me based on my early use with both phones. The 14 Pro Max would be able to last me all day with about 8 to 9 hours of on-screen time, and my 14 Pro would give me 7 hours on a consistent basis. And with the 14 Pro Max, I went in my days with about 20% battery, which was really good. And with the 14 Pro, the battery will be on 10%, which was still really good. Also, I didn't really use power saving mode for this test, so the 14 Pro Max is much better when it comes to pure performance. And when it came to charging speeds, both the 14 Pro and Pro Max were pretty much the same. The fast charging did okay. I will usually charge them overnight, but whenever I charge them during the day, after 30 minutes, they usually be on 70 to 80%. So overall, I would say that the battery on both phones were really good. And if you're someone who's looking to get the 14 Pro or the Pro Max, then the 14 Pro Max is a better buy and will last you longer. So now that we've taken a look at the battery, the next thing I want to look at is the speakers. Now when it came to bass, I would say that the 14 Pro Max's speakers were definitely better. It made listening to songs much more enjoyable. The 14 Pros was still pretty good, especially when compared to other phones in the market, but it didn't really hit as hard. The sound quality on both of them were also really good. Music sounded nice, videos were loud and clear, and speakers overall enhanced my viewing experience because they were just that good. And to give you guys an idea of how both of these speakers sound, I'm going to play a video so that you guys can see just how loud they are.
You are watching one of the greatest performances in the history of this game. Because of what?
And now the final thing that I want to look at when it comes to both of these phones is the cameras. Now the cameras on the 14 Pro Max and 14 Pro were pretty much the same when it came to quality. Both of these phones had a 48 megapixel main camera backed by a 12 megapixel ultra wide and telephoto lens. And as you may know, both of these phones had the same camera, but I still wanted to show you guys some pictures that I took with them so you can get an idea of how they look. Like right here, you can see my outside daytime photos, and I would say that they were really good pictures that turned out really well. The skies were very colorful yet vibrant. The trees and other aspects of nature were pretty nice. My face looked pretty color accurate, especially when compared to last year's version where it would look light at times, and the overall vibrancy of the outside pictures were pretty great to no surprise. And when it came to video quality, both of these phones were pretty much the same. They looked amazing, and to give you guys an example, here are some videos that I took on it. So here's the final question. Should you buy the iPhone 14 Pro or the iPhone 14 Pro Max? Well, in my honest opinion, I think that if you want a perfectly sized phone that's easier to use, then the 14 Pro is a better buy. But if you want a phone that gives you a much better visual experience and has longer lasting battery, then the 14 Pro Max is the best iPhone that you can get. And there it is, you guys. My comparison between the iPhone 14 Pro Max and the iPhone 14 Pro. Now let me know down in the comments. Do you guys think that the iPhone 14 Pro Max is better than the iPhone 14 Pro? Let me know. And if you guys made it to the end of this video, I would like to say thank you for sticking around. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It will be very appreciated. And as far as social media, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. And I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.